Welcome to your video lecture on section 17.4. I'm actually going to put this together with another section just because these next couple sections are a little bit shorter. So first we'll talk about the thyroid gland. We know that the thyroid gland could be found in the neck, and it's located just inferior to the larynx and anterior to the trachea, which we see pictured here. Our larynx is divided between a right and a left lobe, and you can see in the middle here we have a little connection. This connection is called the isthmus. Now, in the last section, we had just talked about how our hypothalamus releases the thyrotropin releasing hormone. That goes to our anterior pituitary gland and releases the thyroid stimulating hormone. So the thyroid stimulating hormone through our bloodstream makes its way to the thyroid gland, and our thyroid gland is going to then secrete thyroid hormones. So let's take a look at the tissue of our thyroid gland to see how these thyroid hormones are produced. So we see in this histology image of our thyroid gland that we have large numbers of our thyroid follicles along in here. So we're going to call these follicle cells. And these are surrounding these cavities that are holding a viscous colloid. So if you remember the term viscous, it means like a thickened type of fluid. So think like maple syrup or honey. And colloid means that we have an even distribution of the solutes in here. So think about mayonnaise and ketchup. So what happens is our follicle cells here are going to synthesize a globular protein called thyroglobulin and secretes it into the colloid of our thyroid follicle. The thyroglobulin molecules are containing the amino acid tyrosine, and you could see that illustrated in the chemical structure here of T3, which the 3 here is representing the 3 iodine atoms that are attached, and T4, known as thyroxine, which has 4 iodine molecules attached. So what does our thyroid gland do? It's going to do a lot of things you can see here. It stimulates our red blood cell production and thus enhances our oxygen delivery because oxygen will bind to the hemoglobin in our red blood cells. It'll also stimulate the activity of other endocrine tissues and accelerate the turnover of the minerals in our bone. It also helps to elevate rates of oxygen consumption and energy consumption in cells, and it does this by increasing the basal metabolic rate. So I said this in a previous video lecture that our basal metabolic rate is essentially how quickly these chemical reactions are taking place within our cell. And we will also increase heart rate, the force of contraction, which leads to increased blood pressure, and also increases in cardiac output. We also have increases in sensitivity to our sympathetic stimulation. So that, remember, that's our fight or flight response. And we can maintain the normal sensitivity of respiratory centers to changes in our oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations within our blood. Now, between the follicles will be a second population of endocrine cells, which are called our parafollicular cells. And in this histology view, you could see that these cells are a little bit of that lighter pink color. You could see another parafollicular cell over here, and their job is to produce calcitonin. So calcitonin is a hormone that is going to help to lower our blood calcium levels when they are too high. It's going to work by increasing the calcium excreted in urine and increasing the deposition of calcium in the bone by stimulating our osteoblasts to essentially take the calcium from our blood and put it straight into the bone. And I like this view of our histology of the thyroid gland as well. We have our follicular cells surrounding the colloid, and then surrounding that area will be these parafollicular cells, which are also called our C cells or clear cells. So we're going to talk about section 17.5 in this video as well, covering the parathyroid gland. Our parathyroid gland can be found posterior to the thyroid gland. So this is a posterior view of our larynx up here and our trachea. You could see anteriorly is where our thyroid gland is, and then here in the bluish green color will be our parathyroid glands. So we can have typically 4 of these, but they can range between 2 and 6, and they're composed of 2 different cell populations. We have our oxyphil cells, which in this slide you see them as the lighter pink color. In this slide you could see that we have a little bit more cytoplasm around the cells along in here, and we really don't know, they're there for some unknown reason. The other cells, though, we have are our chief cells, and our chief cells are going to produce the parathyroid hormone, which will help increase our blood calcium levels when they are too low. So we really will have the parathyroid hormone here serve as an antagonist to calcitonin that we just talked about. So let's take a closer look at our parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. They will work together to maintain homeostasis of our blood calcium levels. So in this figure here, we have our blood calcium concentration dropping. So our parathyroid hormones will parathyroid glands will release the parathyroid hormone, which is going to then cause a couple different effects. Within our bones, we are going to activate our osteoclast. Remember, clast means cut. So we're going to resorb the bone, releasing some of the calcium and phosphate ions in here into the blood. Then within our intestines, we are going to increase our calcium through our absorption from food. So here's our food moving through the lumen. We pull that calcium in through our intestinal cells and put it into our blood. The last effect is going to be on our kidneys. It is going to promote the activation of vitamin D and increases the calcium resorption into our blood. So this is our kidney tubule, the nephron. You could see that we are moving through and into the blood. Now, if we have our blood calcium levels increase, let's say they increase too much, then our thyroid gland is going to secrete calcitonin through those parafollicular cells, and that is going to cause a stimulation of our osteoblasts. So we take the calcium from inside our blood, give it to our osteoblasts to then put into bone so we can build the bone. Blast for build.